Good afternoon, all you humans on the internet, and thank you so much for joining us again today for the fifth Rose Fairs Community Conversation Series in partnership with Lifeline. My name is Ashantu Kunene, and as always, I am your hostess with the mostest. If this is your first time joining us, for context, the Rose Fairs Community Conversations seek to create spaces for us to engage on difficult topics in an open, honest, and candid manner, where we attempt to move past the point of simply problematizing towards actively sharing insights and solutions to help each other heal. In conversation with me today are some amazing women who will take time to introduce themselves when we start. But quickly, we have Mpumile Dwaba, who is an entrepreneur and content creator. We have Nogulinda Mkize, who in her own humble words is just a mom and a sangoma. Thank you. We have Ms. Nandi Lepu, who is an entrepreneur and founder of Mama Gashaga. And then joining us again from our Lifeline partners is Lynn Julius. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining me today in conversation. The topic of our discussion today, guys, is difficult intergenerational conversations, specifically around culture and religion. We struggle to have open, honest, candid conversations with our parents, with our grandparents, with our family members about religion and culture and how that affects our lives as young people, both positively and negatively. And so today we're going to speak to why that is, why these conversations are so difficult to have, especially in the context of the politics of respect, where as a young person, when you are questioning and challenging, you're seen as disrespectful. And so therefore there's no conversation to be had, which defeats the purpose. So at what point do you challenge? Where do you push back? Where do you accept and where do you yield? And in doing so, what is the content of the baton that our generation will put into the hands of the next? And I think this is important because fundamentally the conversation we're having today speaks to what kind of society do we want to create? What kind of humans do we want to raise? Because very clearly, our current society as it is not working so well. So I'm going to ask our guests to kick us off by telling us a little bit about themselves and to give us their thoughts as to the first question, which is why do you think intergenerational conversations about religion and culture are so difficult to have? Why do we struggle to engage openly about religious and cultural pressures when it's religion and culture that your parents give you? And so, Nandi, I'm going to ask you to kick us off. You must unmute yourself, Mama.
Yeah, all the mics are off. Technology these days. Thank you so
Yes.
much for having me. I really feel quite honored to be part of this panel, in particular this conversation. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Nandi Lepu. I'm the founder of the creative agency Mama Gashaka. And what we do is we create and produce authentic content, authentic and meaningful content for partners, brands, and organizations that exist within the arts, culture, and lifestyle space. The business is split into two parts. We have our brands, which is really what we're most known for. These are the platforms that I've created in the last 3 to 5 years, such as Feel Good Series, which is a platform for emerging and eclectic musicians. We also have Bloom, which is a platform for creative women, all about empowering and inspiring creative freelancers and creative entrepreneurs. There's also Pantone Sundays, which is our color-themed fashion party. And I mean, I really could go on, but those are the things that we're most known for, which is our brands. But we're also operate as an agency, because I really do think that, what you can do for yourself, surely you should also do for others. So on the agency side of the business, I operate very much as a creative director and strategist, and we've had a really great opportunities and been able to work with some really meaningful creative brands in the last 2 to 3 years of our existence. And that's basically my 9 to 5.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
amazing. Please, just, can we breathe just a little?
over and above that, I am obviously I'm a daughter, and I'm a mother. And like I said, as part of my introduction, and this particular conversation is one that deeply resonates with me. But I'm going to hand over to the other ladies to introduce themselves before we start responding to the first question.
Okay, no problem. Pumi, do you want to come through, Mama?
Yo, how do I take over from Nandi? um,
What?
right, like she just went on. Hi guys, so I am Mpumi Ledwaba. Firstly, I am a wife. I am a mother to two amazing children, Nuri, who just is turning 2, and Zani, who is 2 months old. I'm an entrepreneur. I've got a business, a nail bar. Well, it's a beauty bar now. We started as a nail salon, and now we do both hair. We specialize in ethnic hair. So it's an inner beauty bar, which is at 27 boxes in Marvel, in case you're popping in. And then I have another company called Mpumi Ledwaba Creations, which is my content creation company, where I also work with brands. I create content for them, we partner with them. And yeah, basically I tell stories, use my platform to share the story that a brand is trying to share to the public. And yeah, that's basically me.
Thank you. Noglinda, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hi everyone, my name is Nogulinda Mkhize. I'm a mother of 4 and a 7.
Yes, that deserves an applause, everybody. What? Whoa.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so, whatever. And I'm also a Sangoma. I've been practicing since 2008. That's all you need to know about me. Don't worry about that stuff. That's all that's important.
Thank you. Lynn, I think to hand over, because also to Germany, but then to kick us off with the first question about why you think these conversations are so difficult to have.
Okay, thank you so much. I understand when you have to walk in other people's footsteps before you. My name is Lynn Julius. I'm a volunteer at Lifeline, which is a non-governmental organization. I am also on the board of Lifeline, so I'm representing Lifeline Pietermaritzburg today, where we're going to be talking about intergenerational conversations. And why do we struggle with it? And we say, whether it's religion or culture that we want to talk about, there's always a message that we want to share. But we have to first find out, like, who designed this message. Remember, in religion and culture, messages come from somewhere. And I am so excited that we have all the young mothers, and I'm the grandmother for all of you. So I'm going to talk from a point of view of having been a daughter, a mother, and now a grandmother. And I'm going to say that we also have as many questions for you as you have. So when we say people are talking about a struggle and they want to communicate the struggle, what has shaped the social role for young people in society today? What is happening out there for them to say that they want to talk about something? And if we have to look at, there's things like the politics that we face, migration, the market economy and poverty. There's like the diseases, the chronic diseases that we're facing, and young people want to know things. But where do they go to for their answers? What does religion and culture say about the things that's important to them? What is religion and culture saying about abuse, about HIV and AIDS, about discrimination, about oppression? So young people are looking to the older ones for answers. And if we don't know enough about our religion and our culture, we're going to pass on the wrong information. So the question was, why do we struggle? We struggle to talk about religion and culture because we don't know enough, and we're not reading enough. We're not finding out enough about it to pass it on appropriately to our young people. So therefore, we have the struggle in terms of trying to talk. Our mindsets, it's set in a way that we're saying, why do we want to challenge the norms? I'm old now. Why do I want to challenge what my mother and father said to me? The message was given to me, so I just need to pass it down. I remember when I was a young girl and my mother said, you know, when you cook a chicken, the back of the chicken is called a parson's nose, the chicken's buttocks. But they say when you roast it, you cut it off. But when you curry it, you leave it. And we couldn't understand. So when we thought about this, my mother said, well, when you put the chicken in the roasting pan, that part couldn't fit in, so they always chopped it off. So it wasn't a tradition. It was just a matter of logic that was passed down to all of us. And if I didn't question, I would have just passed it on to our children to say, when you roast it, you cut it off. So we're saying when this message has to be passed down, young people want to challenge it. And when they challenge it, they can't challenge it in isolation. They need support for them to challenge any messages. And this is where Lifeline as an organization comes in to support these individuals who want to challenge religious or cultural norms. And their confidentiality is paramount. So whether they write in with the pseudonym on email or come in as face-to-face, nobody knows who you are. If you know somebody in the organization, you're not given to them. So what we're saying is that this is a safe place where you can come and say, I'm having a problem in my marriage. There's things that are happening. The hierarchical and the patriarchal systems that I've been married into are threatening my marriage. You know, it's postulated that young men are taught that they have to be the protectors and they have to be the providers. But what happens nowadays, we have all these wonderful women who are becoming enlightened and who are taking the stand. Yes. So the men start feeling a bit threatened and they're starting to feel a little bit inferior because they're not getting those jobs anymore. So what happens? They become angry and frustrated and conflict starts. So why do we struggle? That's the beginning of it. That's when they say, that's when all the trouble starts. When the male becomes angry and he can't talk about stuff, where does he go to?
Sure. Thank you. And I think that's so important. You raise such an important point about the message, right? And I think that also speaks to us now as this generation questioning what are we taking forward? So Nandi, do you want to come in here and tell us what your thoughts are around the difficulty about having these conversations in an open manner? I mean, we talk about it, but we don't talk about it. You know, sometimes we talk around the situation.
Yeah. So I think, you know, I grew up in a household where and I think a lot of us did actually, where it was expected for me to know about my traditions and culture. And often, and growing up, my mom and I would fight about it because I'd do something wrong. Like, let's say, and maybe I do something wrong, and like I would get scolded, and you know, I would respectfully say to my mom, but how was I supposed to know? You've never taught me. You can't pass this on. It's not a process of osmosis, you know. She'd be like, and you know, and then I put that it's, and then the whole family be like, it's because of these Model 6 schools. I'm like, no one told me that this is how I'm supposed to do it. And I think sometimes, like as a people, and we take that for granted, that, and you know, our culture is not written down, because then, you know, when I was in high school and I was going through a really strong Black consciousness phase, and you know, I was trying to find books that would talk to me about what it meant to be a Xhosa person, because that's the other thing for me. You know, I also grew up quite westernized, thinking and not understanding that, you know, we say Xhosa culture, we say Zulu culture, and you know, I'd like to think that it's a little inaccurate. To be Xhosa is, for me, is as equivalent as saying you're a Christian, because being Xhosa comes with a set of beliefs, right?
Yes,
so
yes, yeah.
two things, and I think sometimes by ascribing the Xhosa, Zulu, Sotho as cultures, I think we take them down a notch. But when I try have these conversations at home, it's like I'm not trying to break it apart. I'm trying to understand the components of these things so that I may better represent them, so I can better live them and manifest them and defend them. Because there's nothing like, and I love what you said, Lynn, about like, when you're just told to do something it's a certain way, but you don't understand how, it's very hard to then pass it on to very inquisitive and rightfully inquisitive minds. My son's most annoying question is, why?
Why, Mama? I want to know why. Yes, correct.
All the time. I love coffee. Why? Because why? Like that's and this is the thing, you can't shut down a why with it's disrespectful. It's not in your place to ask us these questions, or worse, like turn around the fact that we've been educated in a very Western way, and weaponize how you've raised me. Bizarre. Now you you weaponize how you raised me, and you go, no, it's all this Western upbringing. Hi, you raised me, hey. But really, I think that the trouble or the difficulty for me growing up was because I didn't want to be disrespectful, and really I grew up with like questioning things was positioned as being disrespectful. Yeah. And that's the challenge. And when what's happening is that obviously there'll be an erosion of culture, because we're not passing down the knowledge, and we're not having people fall in love with the why. Because I mean, as a marketer, it's drummed into us that people don't buy what you do, they buy why. People buy the story behind it, and we need to fall in love with the why do we do the things that we do as Africans. So when someone talks about lobola, let's understand why, and you'll find there's a really rich, interesting history about the practice of lobola. You know, there's all these things, and I think like being raised in a place where it's seen as disrespect, and like my elders being quite defensive as to how they shared and imparted like my legacy, you know? So that was very challenging for me growing up, still is.
Sure, thank you so much. I resonate so much with all of what you said, if you saw my reactions, because these are the, you know, experiences that shape also this weird space of having multiple both and identities, right? You're not just Black, you're Black and privileged, you're Black and this, you're Black. Like, so it's complicated, and the problems that we have in the modern world today, our culture and our religion are not necessarily speaking to that. So Mpumi, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. I just want to take it back to what has been happening in the last 2 weeks. I'm sure you saw what Theresa May said about our hair, that it's dry and it's brittle, etc. And then I had a conversation with the founder of Afro Botanics, which is a natural hair care product. And I asked her, how did she start the product? And she said she went through a phase where every time she tried to relax her hair, it would literally fall apart because it was just too thin, you know. But that's what we do as Black girls. We relax our hair because that's just how it's easier to manage. And then she explained that she went to go and visit her grandmother, who knew so much about hair. And her grandmother, so in the Zulu culture, when a woman is married, you wear iqholo, right? Now iqholo is made out of beads and hats, but her grandmother taught her that back then people used to know how to stretch their natural hair to becoming iqholo. So they didn't use beads, etc. They actually manipulated their own natural hair. So her grandmother started teaching her about that. And she said, now what happened is that there was a disconnect between her mother teaching her how to take care of her hair until she went to a grandmother. Then she learned, oh, this is how you actually take care of it. So it just brings me back to that communication thing and explaining why certain things are done. We just started straightening our hair for no reason, because we simply didn't know what are the right ingredients that should go into hair. How do we take care of our hair? So it's honestly that honest communication between the older generation and the younger generation. But now our mothers, I guess, got skipped because then they're the ones who didn't pass on the information. But now what I've made very important, especially since the birth of my daughter, is having very honest conversations with my mother. In fact, this morning we were talking about respecting children, because we grew up with a child not having a say. Like, a child can't say no. A child has to be nice to every adult they see. So I say, so now if a child is abused, how do they say, Mommy, this person treated me that way? Because immediately we shut them down and say, hey, you respect older people. You understand? So and it was lovely to have my mom open to the conversation that, Mom, you respect my child. Now, we respect children. The way we talk to them is very important. If a child says no, they don't want to do this, then understand, have an open communication and conversation as to why you don't want to have this, why you don't want to greet this person. So Yeah, the disconnect has definitely been there, but I don't think everything is doomed. I just think it's in the way we approach conversations as well. Because of Twitter, us young people can feel like we could just go, hey, why is this not happening? But I think there's just a manner in merging the two upbringings and the two societies, the way they grew up and how we grew up. We still have to approach them with that respecting, but also give perspective as to why we think that this has to be explained, or why this is important, or why we should start conversating. So I think it's really important how we approach. I mean, we are the woke ones now, right? So I think we can do better in approaching and opening up their minds instead of just attacking that you didn't teach me this, you didn't show me this. Let's go approach much better. And I found that even with my grandmother, that certain conversations that would have never happened if I approached them in a respectful way, in her language, it really does open up the mind. We may not always agree, but it's good to have different perspectives. So yeah, I think going back to that conversation I had with the Afro-Botanics lady, is that the information, there was a cut of information somewhere, and we need to restore that.
Sure. No, thank you so much. That's so powerful. I think you also touch on something so important about the approach, the way in which that children also need to be respected, that I think respect goes both ways. But no, Linda, I want to bring you in here. What do you think as a mother of 4? How does the respect happen in your house?
I always said, I want to boast in life and start every sentence with, as a mother of 4. This is, because I'm elevated to a particular level of being an auntie, a mama, a gogo, a baba, And so I want to say, as a mother of 4. But you know what? I think that everything that everybody has said has been very important, and everybody has raised very good points regarding the importance of reconnecting, the importance of us taking the initiative to restore what we need for the future going ahead. Because as we know, the separation, the disconnect, the fragmentation was very deliberate, it was very systematic, and it has happened over many hundreds of years of colonization, of capitalism, of the encroachment of particular religious beliefs that have deliberately disabled us from our intuition, that have deliberately undermined our independence of thought, and also deliberately undermined our confidence in who we are, and othered us in a world where we were the norm. So I think that with everybody being aware of that, it's important to also reckon with the pain of our elders and their elders, going back to say, all of this disconnect comes with a great deal of loss, of mourning, of humiliation, of pain and of suffering. So that, how do I say, when people are growing up in this instant, like for example, my father always gave the notion that when he was studying, at a particular point in his studies, hypertension, type 2 diabetes and suicide were almost unheard of in African people. Fast forward about 15, 20 years, we've got an epidemic of suicide, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes, and directly correlated with urbanization. Directly correlated with the deepening of capitalism, directly correlated with particular laws that have taken our people from the land, from each other, from their ancestors, from their languages, from their own ways of believing and communing with nature, into a space of being other, into a space of being just labor in the eyes of capital, cheap labor at that, and also diminish their capacity for growth, diminish their capacity for independence, autonomy, diminish their capacity for community. And our parents inherited that, and they were fighting against, trying to find themselves in a voice of being young people growing up in the apartheid system, having their questions and limitations, and then having to bring their children into integrating them into a so-called democratic society, into a so-called free society, a so-called, equal opportunity society, when we know that that isn't the case, and that hasn't been the case. And so when we question our parents, we are also coming from a place of pain, saying we feel alienated, having been put in these predominantly white schools and being forced all the time to be reminded of our Blackness in the most humiliating and alienating kind of ways. So when we bring our pain to our parents, it triggers their pain and an ancestral pain as well. Because the pain we carry in this generation isn't just ours. It's the pain of our parents, their parents, and so forth, going back. you know? So when we ask these questions and we have these criticisms, we're triggering lineages of pain, lineages of alienation, lineages of loss and mourning, lineages of anger. And so it's a very difficult thing to start to have these conversations in a fruitful and constructive way. We have a different language from our parents. We have a different experience of the so-called democracy than our parents. A lot of them were just simply relieved to be able to live where they could live, to be able to take us to school where they were told before they were not able to. So they missed a lot of the nuance of microaggressions and other things, particularly within our own families. Because when you become that cousin who lives in the city, in the suburbs, there is a bit of a way in which there's friction in how you relate with your other cousins. There is an expectation, and they take it for granted, like Nandi said. Why are things happening? Why are we slaughtering this goat? You know? Yeah, hey, let's get this out. Meanwhile, they take it for granted because they grew up immersed in that way, and nobody had to explain to them because they grew up seeing it, participating in it, knowing their role in that hierarchy and ecosystem. So they just instinctively know. I'm a Sangoma, I've been practicing for 12 years. There are things I do with my eyes closed because I'm so instinctively immersed. And then telling people simple things that I grew up seeing, because I've had the luxury or privilege of a very rural upbringing and a highly suburbanized upbringing at the same time. And there was never for me a conflict and a tension in that space because I was always swimming in the river, jumping out, okay, then I go to a private school, then I come back, then we're touching, we're skinning, we're, you know, and it's just one of those things. And I'm grateful for my parents for, you know, deliberately ensuring that we have access to our language, access to our families and things like that. But that hasn't been the case for many people because a lot of people have had to move very far away from family for the economic opportunities that they're able to give their children, that gives them the language to question them why. Yeah. And then that feels like a criticism, that feels like an attack, and parents don't take very well to that.
Not at all.
So I think that for me, all of the different points that all the ladies have raised have been great. It's the system, it's the tension between our own generation and our parents' generation. It's the lack of understanding of these frictions and these worlds that our parents have taken for granted because that's where they come from. It's a simple issue of language as well. People assume that children pick up their language just by being there. But you actually have to actively engage your child in that language consistently, make an effort, read the books, sing the songs, be with other children who speak that language in order for a child to gain a language. They're not going to just gain it. When the parents themselves are speaking English to each other, and then they look at their child embarrassed, like, wow, you have to ask yourself, when did you teach me? When did you allow me to go home in my car to spend time with my cousins? You know, if your mom and your dad are those city ones who come with a cooler box and they don't drink the water, they don't participate, they want to come with just groceries and boss everybody around, and then you become alienated as a result of their classist aspirations and their behavior towards their family, it disadvantages us as the children. Well, not me particularly, but you know, I'll say us because you know, it disadvantages us from our family, because if our parents have those capitalist and class aspirations and elitist aspirations, they do tend to look down upon their own family, which means we don't get an opportunity to connect with our people the way that we deserve. And to criticize our parents' class aspirations says to them, oh, you're not grateful for what I've been doing. Yes, I worked so hard for this bond. Yes, I worked so hard. You know, your school uniform, but it's like, actually, simply, we need to discuss you as a parent. We need to discuss your perspective. We need to discuss how you relate with your community, how you see yourself. And once we're able to do that, then maybe our parents can begin to be more honest about this thing.
Sure. Like the Moya just went and took you, and I resonate because you're literally speaking about my life. I resonate so much, you know, and these are painful conversations, especially about the language. I'm a non-Zulu, grew up speaking English. Zulu I learned at school, high school, because girls were talking about me in front of me in Zulu. What? Never. So I learned the language because the context, right? You had a private school. So I think for me, what is so powerful about all of your contributions as to what the issue here is that I'm remembering an analogy that my aunt gave me. She said that she had attended a anti-apartheid what Fees Must Fall dialogue we were doing, and she was the only adult in the room. And after all the students were talking about, decolonizing, freedom, all these things that we were doing in 2015, she said, what is so profound is that apartheid, people talk about the architecture of apartheid, like it's a building, né? And as young people, we forget that the bricks, the mortar, the electricity system, everything, these are our parents, these are our culture, these are our family members. So how do we now dismantle the system without hurting and breaking the bricks that are our parents and our family? How do we do this? Because we are on the same page that the building needs to come down. We need to dismantle the master's house, but how do we now do this in a manner that is still loving? So I think this segues nicely into our second question, is that where do we challenge, where do we accept, when do we push back, and when do we, yield when it comes to things of culture, things of religion? I mean, we can take Lobola as an example. Like I struggle with the idea of being paid for, but I was Lobola because it's my family. Like I had no say in that. Like there was no, and then on top of that, speaking to what you said earlier, Nandi, about being suddenly expected to know cultural rights when no one sat you down to explain that this is how this thing goes, right? So how do we navigate this thing? So speaking also about taking initiative to restore what we need to move forward, Nolinda, what you said. So what does that look like? What do we do? How do we engage this question?
I don't think that there's, oh, sorry.
No, please go through, go.
Okay, I don't think that there's a formula for any of this. And I think that we are right. For example, in Lobola, we must at some point, I think as African people, with everything that we've lost, be able to say, yes, Utin, a lot of the things in our culture, not everything, and not necessarily even the foundation, a lot of it has been corrupted. There's so much that we don't know about ourselves that we are understanding and integrating into our realities from the lens of colonization, from the colonizer's imagination, And so, because we've lost so much, I think that people are very defensive about holding on to traditions and cultures that have been distorted and they have failed to adapt and evolve for whatever the reasons may be. There's no judgment here, but we failed to evolve a language of understanding. Pre-colonial times, Ilobolo was structured a certain way. There was no cash exchanged. And as soon as men were able to lobola with the same currency that they used to buy their possessions, when men were starting to lobola in an environment, in an ecosystem with particular patriarchal norms that may not have been organic to the way that we were in pre-colonial times, that shifted the whole thing. When we began to accept a particular place in our world, or actually forced to accept a particular place in our world on the basis of particular religious colonial ideas, and that is not to say that religions themselves intrinsically are bad, but the way in which they are applied within the lens of capitalism also distorted the way in which we were able to relate and engage, and changed the way in which women were able to be structured and seen and respected and received by their very society. So I think that it's difficult, but we do need to have the conversation, even if it's amongst ourselves, because maybe our parents are too far gone in the pain and they can't get through it. We do need to say, yes, our cultures are important. Yes, our cultures have been uplifting. Yes, there are gendered aspects to our culture. No, that doesn't mean that they were necessarily patriarchal and misogynistic in the beginning. However, now that we have all of this rot of colonization and capitalist aspirations, of our own power and individualistic impositions, how do we reclaim things that are important for our ancestral practices? Because none of that changes. Regardless of the world that we live in, regardless of our views and our politics, the ancestral and ritualistic imperatives remain. Mm-hmm. And they were put in place to root people in a particular understanding of themselves and to uplift their humanity. So even though the walls may be crumbling, the foundation may still be something that we need to go back to and say, okay, what do we take, what do we leave behind? But I don't think that there's a formula for that. And it's very, it's up to a person and their clan about how they address that.
And just to jump in here, I think for me, it's it's going back to understanding why things were done, because we have to be open-minded enough to then adapt from the why, because this is the thing, and this is where I think part of the rot is formed, is when we hand over these things, but we don't explain, you know, the symbolic significance of this thing. What was the intention? So what was the intention behind the act of ulobola? How do we then, you know, take that intention and evolve and repackage this right in a way that takes into consideration what we, you know, what we need to avoid, and the kind of world and the kind of human beings that we're trying to nurture and create. And so for me, like, I'm constantly asking, ngoba, so why is he lento? But I also think, I'm not sure who said it earlier, that we have to be proactive, right? We have to be proactive. And I remember as a family project, I was also really, step back. I was at a friend's house in high school. Her name is Gilly Apter, Jewish, and we went to visit her other Jewish friend, Ruth. As we entered Ruth's beautiful Saxon World home, as we got to like, and there's like, is it a courtyard, a foyer? But there's an area before you enter the house.
The
Yeah, there's an entrance hall.
Entrance hall.
Yeah, so there was this portrait, and it was of a family tree, and I noticed it, because it was massive, but also it didn't really fit in with the rest of the house, and so I was drawn to it as a result. I got closer to it and noticed that it was actually a family tree. They had actually like had someone create this family tree, and there's copies, I believe, in other and for the rest of the family, but it showed their lineage for hundreds of years. And I remember saying to my aunt, and I'm like, this is like, when we talk about family and legacy, sometimes they are so empty because it's lacking in intention. It's lacking in effort and in work. And when I remember telling my family about that, because I was on some, can you name our cousins 3 people removed? We don't know. We don't know. But we're going to talk really like passionately and strongly about how family matters. And I'm like, if family matters, we have to put work into family. If history matters, we have to put work into that history. Same to be said about legacy and so on. So for me, and I think Nokulinda, you were also saying some things, you know, we'll have to let go of, and some things we'll keep. But I think that the onus is on us within our respective families to start recording our history, guys, because in 2 more generations, it's gone. Being Xhosa is gone. Being Zulu is gone. If you go to Google now and you type in Xhosa and you go to the Wikipedia definition of Xhosa, it is so incorrect. But that's what's going to exist if we don't start scribing our legacies, our history, and passing them on. And for me, it's of huge, like, it's worrying. Like, it really worries me that I don't think that this rich history of ours, so much of it is lost already. So much of it, and
Yeah.
we have to use this technology, and we have to start scribing. So whatever you know, and I think people should do stuff like that as families. Start archiving how your rights. You know, how you pray. You know, I remember trying to learn how to pray, like, and what each candle, you know, what each color candle signified. It was like pulling a tooth from my mother. And she'd get annoyed. I'd be like, okay, so if I want to do this, so what, must I use the yellow candle, or must I use the yellow with the white? And it's like, and you can just see, and I'm like, be careful. Be careful. I'm telling you now, because, you know, Christians are taught when you pray, you must get on your knees, you must, you know, and yet when I ask you how I'm supposed to pray to my own ancestors, yeah, and it's problematic. But I think that definitely there needs to be some kind of proactive action, because again, something Nokulinda said is that, you know, we're carrying around so much trauma. And sometimes we pose seemingly innocent questions and you don't know how triggering the thing you have said is and what it has awoken in that person. And sometimes that person doesn't even know why they've reacted in such defense with such anger. There's just so much, like, you know, like trauma that we as Black people just carry with us subconsciously. But I think the onus is on us as parents now, as we are Butini earlier woke generation. I mean, we have to. The responsibility is on us now. It's on us.
Yeah.
I can look back and note, like, my mom should have done this, but I don't want my son now to look back and be like, now about.
I think as much as I initially said, and I still stand by it, that we have to approach our family with respect, at the end of the day, somebody will get upset. And we have to be okay with that. And I'll bring it back to my personal story. I got married at 23, and I didn't get the whole concept of ilobola, to be honest. And it, like, just like you, I grew up in a family in the suburbs. Yes, ekhaya, KwaZulu, there's tradition, there's all these things, but I'm not immersed, I'm not interested. I'm living my great life in the suburbs, there's water, everything is great. Why do I have to immerse myself in that life? You know, that was just my upbringing. And then come lobola, girl, now we have to be traditional. This one must come, this one must come. And then my husband and I agreed with, you know what, later, and he comes from a Christian family where they're not traditional at all. So the lobola thing was basically on us. And we both decided, you know what, we will respectfully do ilobola just to respect my family, but we are going to get married that evening. So we're going to have lobola in the morning, we're going to get married that evening, because we just want to get married and we don't want the fuss, we don't want the big wedding. And nobody understood. It became a huge fight where the family was like, no, but this one must be invited, this one must be invited, this. It became a whole thing. And we had to take the stand and say, you know what, we respect this tradition, but this doesn't make sense to us. It doesn't make sense to us that the whole of KZN and people who've never been involved in my life have to now come eat money that I already don't have. Now I must take a loan just to make sure that a tradition nobody can explain is fulfilled. You know, and that's the part where I say somebody will get upset. Yeah. But hey, they're living and they're fine and nobody got into debt. But what I'm trying to say is that there's certain things where we honestly have to take a stand with, unless there's a real explanation. Why should I continue? Why should I pass this on? Because like I said earlier, sometimes we pass on things, we have no idea what we are awakening. We have no idea what this entails, why this was done. Was this some sort of sacrifice to who to do this? We don't know. So we really need to know. Otherwise, we kind of have to say, okay, well, this is not happening in my home. And that is just a stand my husband and I have taken, that unless there's honestly, it's well researched and well explained, we're not partaking. So as a result, we had our lobola, we had 50 people at our wedding. The ones who got angry, but then they eventually forgave us because they clearly realized there's no reason to be angry. And then recently my dad came to us and he said, you know, you guys didn't do umembes, right? And we were like, yeah, well, we married, we happy. And I think when he was transparent about how it made him feel, that to him, umembeso is taking me, umntwana kaMondlane, to Galituha, but to say, hey, nangu makoti wenu. Then I was like, oh, okay, now I understand why we do umembes. Before I thought it's just we buying blankets for dead people. Why am I doing that? You know? But when he sat with us and he said, umembes, so what is that? Migisa will take you to the Ledrava home so that they can accept you as umakoti wa umntwana wabo. Then I said, okay, great. Now we can do umembes. But it had to be at a point where he was not telling us, as an adult who pays rent, you can no longer tell me what to do, you know? So it was no longer a dictation where someone's dictating and saying, this is tradition, this is culture, but someone saying, this is how this makes me feel as your father, and this is how it makes me feel as someone who has practiced this tradition, and how it would make me feel if you did the same thing. Then it lined up. Then there's empathy, there's sympathy, then there's all of these feelings that you put together that make sense in your head. Then you can say, okay, cool, now let's pass this on. And then another thing, just to bring it back again, with Lobola, my dad wanted cows, he didn't want money. And I didn't get it. I thought he was just being difficult. Already we're doing this Lobola thing. Now you want cows too? Where in the world are we supposed to find cows that are living and walking? Just take the money. And then he also kind of explained that with him, he can always make money, but to just see those cows means something to him. And there's significance. And both the cows that my husband took to my house, the first one gave birth 2 weeks before I gave birth to my daughter. And the second one gave birth as well 2 weeks before I gave birth to my son. And going to my dad's farm and seeing those cows and naming them, it brings something to us, whereas Imali could have been used a long time ago. So now with my daughter, having those feelings, having that relationship, understanding how it made my father feel, and seeing the cows, the significance of the cows having children before I have children, it's beautiful. Now I can pass it on to my daughter and explain it without it being this thing of I'm dictating, we're doing this because that's just how it's done. So like I said, I think it has to take a lot. Someone will get angry. And secondly, it has to get to a part where we communicate as emotional beings, but not as you're up there and I'm down here.
Yeah, and I resonate so much with that because I also had a Lobola experience. My story was that I was marrying a whole German person. So I had a German family asking me, so why must we buy blankets? Me saying, because apparently it's culture, but why? And then me going home to say, but why are we buying blankets? And then the whole thing of, you know, you're being disrespectful, you're asking, like it was, people got flustered and didn't take the time to explain to me. So I was like caught in the middle of having to explain the cultural why, and then also having the realization that I actually don't have the knowledge to answer these people and tell them about my culture. And I'm marrying into a different culture and they can tell me their traditions and their whys and the reason they do things, but somehow here I am, a whole grown person, ill-equipped. So at what point now do you then, you know, take responsibility for that? I think also the whole thing about taking initiative is like, I want to be able to move forward knowing that I can also then pass on cultural practices or religious practices to my kids, but be able to explain the why. And I think the story that you just shared with us, Mpumi, is so beautiful. And I think it's an amazing example of what the kind of love and growth that happens when you do engage with your children openly and honestly about cultural practices, right? Because the opposite is just not conducive to anything, like, you know?
I like what Mpumi said about someone who will get upset. And I think that sometimes our generation is the one that's going to be upset. And that's also, you just have to be strong because you have to realize that maybe your perspective is informed by Leslungu, that your parents paid for, that you now resent. You know, your perspective is, informed by the echo chamber of your online interactions, if that's where you gained your politics and sense of identity. And you just have to contend with that. You're not always going to, just because you've got big words in theory, doesn't mean, Uguti, you are the one that must come with the self-righteousness of criticism and critique and theory. Sometimes you're the one that's going to be upset because then you have to contend with the flaws and the holes in your own self-perception and perception of the world. And I think that that's okay. And I love that. Barely someone's going to get upset. There always has to be a generational friction. Otherwise, cultures don't evolve.
There
has to be.
But when you look at what Mpumi is saying, I'm so thankful that I can die hearing her say this, that it's your confidence and your boldness to say your family stood by you when you had to make big decisions about your culture. It wasn't that they ostracized you. Maybe you felt whatever it was, but to hear you tell your story and to say your father came back to tell you, it means there was some communication, there was some respect happening. And the question was in this generational conversation is like, where do the people start, young people start challenging? It's in the family system. And if your family system cannot support you, you can't expect to go out into the community, into the world and disrupt over there if in your household, because we can't talk about a family, in your household, you haven't sorted out your own business. And I'm saying as young people, we need to come back to our homes, this place where you're living, where you're laying your head down. What are you doing to contribute here? Instead of going out to work, like they did a study of young girls that were leaving school early and went to work on a timber farm. And Lifeline was involved in the study. And why were the girls leaving? Because they were telling the community that they found their man. And so now I need to go out and work so I can go and buy the bed and the blanket and whatever it is because I found my man. So what happens to this girl now that has not completed her education, has to rely on a man that's hardly ever there? She's gone out to work and that's going to be her life for the rest of her life. But we take a girl that's going to kick up against this tradition and say, no, I can see the benefits for myself and my family. I want to continue my education. Yeah. And her family supports her. So this is what we're saying, like,
no, do finish the point.
I'm saying, like, if you see that as mothers, we need to take the stand of, am I educating my daughters? Because if I get a daughter-in-law, am I going to treat her the way I treat my daughter? Or am I going to kick my daughter-in-law outside and say, you will be treated how I was treated as a daughter-in-law? Because that's how tradition was. But when I talk to you and I say, this is how I want to treat my daughter, that woman that your son brought in is your daughter as well. So tradition is saying the family unit is the one that we need to see being fed, being nurtured. This household needs to be fed and nurtured.
So I wanted to add, and it's something that I often find myself really speculating on is, do we as human beings live with consideration? I think on the back of the pandemic and life slowing down significantly across the board, I think we're still we were in a rat race. I've always thought as someone, I didn't realize how fast and haphazardly I was living literally until April, May. I just didn't realize how quickly, because in the last couple months, I have sat longer on on what it means to be Black, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a mom. I have sat much longer than I ever had I think in a very long time. Mm-hmm. And I started and then I don't know if anyone else has gone through this, but I worry about when the pandemic ends. I worry about when the pandemic ends because I'm scared of reverting back. I'm scared of joining back into the rat race, and then I'm busy, and more Black people are going to continue dying and we're not going to do anything about it. More women are going to continue getting killed. We're not going to do anything about it. Because, there's lots of shifts happening, and we have to be honest, it's because now people have time on their hands. Now people have time on their hands because I cannot believe the enough is enough that's happening now, particularly around Black Lives Matter, when this has been happening
for
hundreds of years. But now we don't have that many distractions anymore. So now we are forced to sit with things. And so for me, I often muse around the lack of consideration that we have for our lives and for our relationships. For instance, I always say, friends of mine will be like, oh, it's time to have a baby. And I'm like, whoa. I love just thinking.
I love how she just died.
And I'm like, do you have any idea the work it is being a parent? And a lot of people are becoming parents without considering the responsibility it is to be a parent. People are impressed when they come and I'm reading books. Even my son is 9. I'm still reading books about parenting. I'm still doing this. I'm still doing that. And are impressed at the education. I'm like, it is part and parcel. It is part and parcel. And I remember when I was a kid, I don't know what was going on, and I think I was reading a Dr. Phil book, and it was about like relationships, etc., but he was saying, why is it everybody accepts that in order to get a driver's license, in order to drive a car, you need to, to get a driver's license, you need to study, you need to be equipped. Everybody understands that in order to do anything, there's a certain level of equipment that must be, you know what I mean? You need to get skilled. And yet people willy-nilly want to have children. Just, like we want to have kids. You didn't read anything, you just want to have children. I'm astounded. So I'm like, no, like you are shaping a whole human being here. You are shaping a whole human being. So like, even, and I don't know how it fits into the intergenerational conversation that we're having, but I think part of the difficulties that we're also having is because we're not intentional in how we live our lives and in the fact that we want to bring other human beings in here. So we have not considered how we're going to rear and speak to these people. And
Nandi, actually,
go for it.
Can I jump in quickly? While you're talking about the whole kids thing, I had a conversation with Mapalo Maku. She's a financial author. And we were talking about the whole planning thing around kids. And I went home and my mother-in-law and my mother like, yo, one more child and we'll be happy. And my mother-in-law has 4 kids, my mom has 3 kids. And I'm just like, one more child where? How? Why is it that we think we should just, it's one of those conversation things again. Why do I need another child? Is it because you had 4 kids, you had 3 kids, or children are a blessing? But how are they a blessing if you don't plan for them, you're not emotionally available for them, you can't supply for them financially? I believe kids should have a soft life. We call it a soft life now. And I want my kids to have a soft life, but I understand that if I pop one more baby, it means I have to sacrifice work. That means I sacrifice the type of lifestyle that my kids get, the attention. Am I emotionally available, or can I handle another child? And it's that conversation thing again where it's just Ivan Umtuana, Zala, it's a good thing. That's just what everybody does. And you haven't spoken about, does a couple even want a child? Do they have the mental or emotional capacity to have children? It's a conversation thing again that everybody just shoots at married people that have a child. And then you have a child and then you realize, oh, shucks, it's not just have a child.
Yeah, and I think you guys are raising something so important. And Linda, I see I'll bring you in here. I think I just wanted to say that what resonated with me was when you said, Nandi, consider the responsibility of parenthood before having a kid, right? And I think for me, why that also resonates is like, the older I get, I don't have children, and I'm very, very grateful I don't have children, because I'm the eldest grandchild in my family. Seeing my cousins grow up, but it's just like, guys, these are whole people. That is a level of self-policing as a human, as a parent, that you need to be constantly aware of, because kids remember things that you say, they hear things. You can't just enjoy in front of a child, because you're properly formulating their minds and also determining what kind of mental health issues they're going to have in the future. So this is a large responsibility. Thank you so much for that point. Linda, you can jump in there.
A mother of 4.
As a mother of 4, yes, come with it. Come with it.
To say that I really appreciate the fact that, because I think Nandi and I are closer in age. I don't know, Bumi, how old you are, but like I feel like we're getting into that Dabao stage.
I'm 26.
Oh, okay. I'm 35, and I think Nandi is around there somewhere as well. 37, yeah. So we're getting into that anti-stage. Yeah, well, there's kids who are teenagers now that are born when I was an adult in my family. So you know, and I like what Nandi is saying, because intention is so important, and understanding of our limitations as well, because we no longer have the social infrastructure to be haphazard about how we have our children. A lot of women don't have the choices that we have to plan and decide and have autonomy over our bodies, how we give birth and when we give birth. So we are part of the privileged few women who even have a say. And where we do have a say, we have to act with that consciousness and consideration that Nandi is talking about, because we have so much more at our disposal. We are lacking the intention a lot of the time. We just take it, it's just that, okay, it's a biological imperative, you're broody, you want to have a kid, that's what's done, okay. But socially, do we have the infrastructure? Living in the city, I know that I have struggled to be in a nuclear family. I don't know that thing. I wasn't raised in a nuclear family. I don't relate with the nuclear family structure. I can see how counterintuitive it is. And I can see how this nuclear family structure also lends itself to this thing of, you know, silencing of children, taking away the rights of children, because it's a lot for two people or one person to handle all the questions, all the needs, all the desires, all the action and activity and energy of a child. It literally takes many adults to be able to raise a person, because umalume plays a role, baba mdala plays a role, ugogo, dadobawo, auntie, your cousins, your, you know, everybody plays a role in the raising of a child. And one consideration that we are not making is the fact that our social infrastructure is lacking for the children that we seem to want to keep bringing into the world. And those of us who do have a choice have that additional responsibility to be those community members and to be that infrastructure for ourselves and for other people, and to look back and say, okay, know why that these kids keep asking us. We shouldn't be the only ones who are answering it. You know, and as much as, you know, the research, the learning, and what Nandi said was so important to say, simple thing like a driver's license, baking a cake, you need a recipe. You know, dyeing your hair, you listen and you read and you learn. You sit for hours on YouTube learning to highlight and contour, but making a baby is just like, well, ngoba I've got the hardware, let me just, you know.
Let me just.
There, I've made a child.
Oh, guys, this is so hectic.
And because we are raising children not for ourselves and for themselves only, we are also raising children for the world.
Yes.
We do to take those things into account. What am I saying to my children? How am I teaching my children? How do I restore and reclaim what was taken from my childhood and my lineage and give it back to my children so that we can give back into the future, because it doesn't belong to us. We're leaving this world. Our children will be here and leave those things to other people. And what Nandi was saying about taking pride in our histories, the effortfulness, the mindfulness, the consciousness, all of those ingredients are so crucial, because we are not here for ourselves. We are here for the future. We have to enrich the foundation and take it forward and leave our kids with the bricks and the mortar and the aesthetic designs for the world that they want to recreate as well.
Yeah.
So speaking on that point, which is the perfect segue to the last question, and I think we must spend half an hour talking about that, right? Because that's exactly what it is. We're raising children for the world. And because the world as it is has been broken, guys. And on top of that, we are also the generation that's dealing with very real climate change. Like this thing is scary. This is not people are out here saying, what is the point of going to school if there won't be an Earth in 10 years? What is the point? So in terms of the content of the culture and the religion and the things that we're passing on to our kids moving forward, right? What does that look like? What are the good things that we are moving forward? What are the things that we need to be focusing on in terms of raising proper humans, besides getting a manual or a license to drive and create a bun in the oven? I think that's a beautiful suggestion. There needs to be some sort of class, mandatory class that you must take before.
Everybody get a certificate.
Yeah, everyone must have a certificate of baby making permission.
Credibility. So I think for me, I'm very concerned about raising a good human being. You know, my son and I have never had conversations, or I've never reared him or given him instructions based on his gender. The whole thing is about being a good human being, right?
Yeah.
So and I think and part of being again, like I'll hop on about like you have to be intentional as to how you're raising your kid. The way that you have goals for your life, the way that you have goals for your business, the way that you have, goals for your relationships and your friendships. You like, I want to be in a relationship and the man must be kind. We must, Fridays is dinner, it's, date night. We must,
Nice.
we must do a holiday on the continent once a year.
Oh, no.
These are the things you have for your child as well. So I'm like, I want my child to be a kind person. I want him to be respectful. And because I tell him, I want you to be this kind of human being. And I will ask him, what does it mean to be kind? We constantly have those types of like conversations. And I think, and this is like an interesting thing for us all to think about. My son goes to like one of these new schools, right? And it's been such a debate. He's in grade 3 now. And basically, I feel like if I want him to go to like a Parktown Boys or Saints or whatever the traditional schools are, that this is the time. If I don't move him now, because it gets too hard how they teach in the school versus traditional schools. So I'm like, this is it. And my mom and I were having this conversation. Ati, why do you want to move him? And I'm like, I just don't like how these new schools don't take sports seriously. Me, I was a hockey girl, I was a netball girl, squash, tennis. I was very sporty. And then, and then she's on some sort, but what's your hesitation? And I said to him, a lot of the schools, I don't think, like my son's school is so intentional about rearing good people. Like for instance, as part of their end of year, as they're getting the certificates, they had each child write something kind or that they liked about the other child. So if you were in a class of 20, you had 20 notes of affirmation from the other kids. And as you were getting your certificate, you had to pick out 1 or 2 of these things and read them out loud. It was such a powerful and moving thing. So there my son is, and man, and this one kid had written, Akani, I like how Akani is always kind to me when I'm by myself. He comes and he will play with me or whatever. And the thing is, what they're doing there is the kid then is like, because now we're not just saying you are the best in this, you're number 1, which is, I think, still important. I think that's important. Yeah. But they go out of the way to affirm like traits, like just basic trait. And never in my schooling was being kind a thing. It was never pulled out. So I said to my mom, and my mom was like, well, then I think you've answered your question. I think, would you rather he was really good at cricket, but, be raised within toxic masculinity? Shade much, mom.
And that's also such a difficult thing, because now it's like, are you also equipping and raising children to be able to deal with the world that is fundamentally unkind? Because the kinds of humans that we're talking about don't exist generally en masse,
Absolutely. And I often worry of like, is he being too soft? But like, I mean, we have to stop doing that. We can't equate kindness with softness. There's strength.
Yes.
100%.
That's very toxic. So I think, like, again, on intention, it's about like, you can't live without a goal. You have to have a goal for this human being. You have to have a goal for yourself, and you have to be quite considerate about how you reach or fulfill those goals. So, and I just find that people we're just living. We're just
exactly.
What's that phrase? We're just shooting from the hip. I'm like, I don't want to shoot from the hip. Can you plan, please?
And personally, Nami, I have a complaint about this just because it keeps me so unnecessarily busy. I have a practice. It's busier than it needs to be, honestly. Yeah. Why? Because people don't understand cons, as what my 5-year-old daughter calls it. Action, outcome.
Cons.
It's action, still outcome. And I think as a country, but that's another conversation. But you know what, Nandi, we're having the same issue, because one of the big things for me was to say, what kind of person am I raising for the world? And given Johannesburg, the way that it's spatially planned doesn't lend itself to my child naturally being able to make friends with just anybody. You know, it lends itself very particularly along particular racial lines, depending on where you live, and particular class lines. And that in itself can handicap your child's ability to grow into the full person that he knows he can be, or she knows she can be, or they know they can be, because we are segregated still very much along. We live in a suburb for the school. It's a good state school, but we're living in a suburb that just doesn't lend itself to my child being able to make friends and experience his environment in a way that he deserves as a child. So we are constantly having to grapple with that. So we'll see, raising our children, yes, they can get the good education, as Nandi is saying, in the traditional schooling and all of that, be a full person and well-rounded and all of that. But if you're not exposing him to his community and society, how are we now perpetuating the very thing that we are crying about to our parents? Yeah,
Exactly.
did you know my nose in? And now we have to, we have to now re-heal the wounds that we had also felt. And if we have the privilege to make those kind of decisions, then we should. And it goes back to Nandi's point about the intention, the mindfulness, and the consciousness of raising our children for the world, that all of those things need to be taken into consideration. Your child is modeling behavior from home, as what Lynn said. And family is more than just your mother, your father, and your siblings. Your family is a much broader community. And the point that Nandi was making about her raising a kind child means that she has to be an intentionally kind person. That has to be always at the top of her mind, because children watch and remodel more than they listen with their ears.
Exactly.
So if we want kind, considerate, intelligent, respectful, creative, self-assured children, we have to be kind. You can't tell your child.
You hit the nail on the head, Nokulinda. Absolutely. And when we started off, we said, when you change you, everything else changes.
Akani doesn't just play with other kids because his mother said be kind. Akani is modeling behavior that he's seeing. He is modeling a kindness. He's modeling Ubuntu because he sees his parents, his primary caregiver, and his community espouse those values on a consistent basis, and it gives him the sense. So the world is a mess. Yes, we get it. But if we who have the privilege of understanding particular and access and freedom to make certain choices, we have to model our children.
Exactly. And yet at the same time, we have to be patient, because remember, they say, how do you eat an elephant?
One piece at a time.
Eat it one bite at a time. Exactly. And you will eventually finish the elephant. But we want everything instant, instant coffee, instant hot chocolate, instant cappuccinos. We want instant children. Somebody was talking about the pandemic. We've been blessed now with the pandemic to have WhatsApp videos, prayer time with our extended family. And our grandchildren go to a Christian school, and they also go to church. But now that church is closed and Sunday school's closed, the parents realize that there's a gap. The children aren't learning about Jesus. They aren't learning about a relationship with Jesus. They know all the stuff the school's teaching them. And then they said, no, but you, as me as the elder, can you then start another online course with them? So we have church on Wednesday and Sunday, and we have a class on a Tuesday, because the parents have realized the importance of having this all-rounded child. I'm sending my child to this good school, but what are we doing to make sure that we add value to our children in terms of what they have to do? So we're going to give one message at a time to our children. We're going to work on one family at a time. We're going to work in one community at a time. We're going to have one conversation with old people and young people. And if we look at those things have been done. About 12 years ago, I worked in Newcastle area in northern KwaZulu-Natal. And this preschool were applying to become a health promoting school. So the schools had education stuff, but we taught them how to be health promoting. And part of their requirement was they had to have community involvement. And when we got there to assess the school, we saw all these grannies around. And it was like, why? No, these grannies are part of the school. When our teachers are sick and when children can't come to school, the grannies come in and sit and help us. When the big children have to go to school and the young ones are sick, the grannies go home to look after the child. The grannies are part of the schooling system. And this is 12 years ago. And when you told me about this conversation, I said intergenerational conversations have been happening, but we as the people need to make it happen. And if we look at that school, they already had the idea because it's tradition. Newcastle is very rural. It's a rural area. People don't have much water and lights, but they understood the value of family. They understood values. You were talking about respect, of being humble. And when we say, is it religion or culture? I will say, is it your faith? What do you believe in? And what are your values? Can we give you those small messages every day so that you eat this elephant one day at a time? Because you said you want your child to be kind, but have you ever said to your child, hey, you know what? I can't wait for the day when you're going to grow up to be a criminal. So we don't look at our child where they're going to end up. We're always looking at what we want to see in the good parts for our child. But we're saying, how do we tell our child that if you do this, you're not going to land up there, so we don't want to see you here? So our message needs to be consistent as households or as units, because I don't know if we can call them households, as the unit where these children are growing up.
Yeah. I mean, I often say to my son, when I've caught him at a lie and I'm on some, do you want to be a criminal? I'm like, do you want to be a criminal? And he's like confused, like, no, why? I'm like,
that's how it starts. One small lie.
I'm like,
That's
lying,
what criminals do.
lying is a value of a criminal. Is that what you want? Do you want to have that trait? You have to equate the thing with the, people
With
be
the
like, oh,
outcome.
like, Munna, it's criminal. And I'm like, do you want to be a criminal? So when he thinks lying, he thinks criminal. It's not lying is bad, lying is bad. It's criminal, like it's black and white for us. So, but like,
Nandi, I actually liked what Nandi was saying about intention. And to just answer the question, when I had to think, what kind of child am I raising? I got saved as a born again at the age of 13, right? But I didn't like my sister growing up at all. I started liking, and when I say I didn't like her, I don't mean like little fights. Like I genuinely didn't like her and didn't understand why she had to be in my life. Yet I was Christian and praying in tongues, reading the Bible, etc., right? And then I came to a point where things didn't go the way they were supposed to go in my life. I made now mistakes where, oh, you're not perfect Patty anymore. And in that moment of my life, I discovered the love of Jesus. And that's when I discovered that's the whole point of Christianity. That's the whole point of why I got saved. For the love, not for all these laws of I can't hang out with this one because they do this. And that's how I've chosen to raise my children. Before anything else, it's love. And when you operate from a place of love, you don't have time to be unkind because you're so busy loving. When someone cuts you off at the robot, you can't shout at them and be impatient because you're busy loving. You communicate and you act from a place of understanding and love. And that's why Jesus went to the cross for us. He said, you know what?
Yes.
You're going to mess up a whole lot of times, but you know what? I still love you. I'm going to do this for you anyway. I love you,
Amen.
And so that's the kind of kids I want to raise in everything my children do, from performing at school, from taking up a career, from how they treat people. Is it from a place of love? In all aspects, when you're writing down a note, it's either do it with love or don't do it at all. And then I think everything else follows. And even when Jesus was asked, what is the most important commandment that we should keep? And he said, love. Love, love, love. And I think that's what's missing in our community is why people loved us. They wouldn't feel the need to put us down. They wouldn't feel the need to kill us. If men loved us, if they were raised in love, they wouldn't feel the need to abuse us. So I think all of this, it's love. The people, when I know R. Kelly is cancelled, but when the whole thing was happening with him, and my husband and I were having a conversation, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think he's a sick person. I see someone who is mentally ill, because I don't think anyone is born to hurt somebody.
Yes.
Nobody is born. I don't think anybody in their right mind wakes up and says, today I'm gonna kill everybody. I'm gonna make people feel bad. I don't think anybody wakes up like that. But there's something that happens. Obviously, traumas kick in and mental illness kicks in. And when I look at a person like R. Kelly, with everything he's done, I see someone who is sick, who needs attention, who needs healing, and who needs rehabilitation. So I think that's how we need to start looking at people. And hurtful as it is, no matter how much people hurt us, what we need to teach our children is that when somebody does this, it's empathy. It's empathy again. Why would this person do this? It's like when you shout at your child, afterwards you feel bad, like, you don't want to do that. You don't wake up saying, today I am going to shout at her. I'm going to make her day miserable. We don't. And I think that's how we need to look at people. Nobody wakes up wanting to just ruin everybody's day. There's a lot of things involved. And that's why the essence of our children, everything we teach needs to be from a point of love. And it goes back to that intention again. What do you want your child to be? And I want my child to be loved, because if they love, they're going to do their job with love. They're going to excel. And if you do your job with love, you're going to excel. They're going to treat people with love. If they have a business, their staff is going to be happy because they're going to love that. If there's an old woman crossing the road struggling, they won't look away like our generation does, because there's love. You feel for people. So I think, honestly, what we need is a whole lot of love.
A love revolution. Talking about a love revolution.
Just very quickly, Ashanti. It's so interesting when you said that, when you talked about, like, when you shout at your child and like Nyanshim, like your heart breaks. So I honestly, when I was raised, like Ubetwa, you were hit.
Nepande.
What are you talking about? I come from the school of go to the garden, pick a stick. So I must now select the weapon.
That's the bell.
Is the one that hurts the most.
Yeah. It was so traumatic. I mean, it's great that now, we can laugh about it. So I've always I thought, do I want to be also like a child, a parent who hits like their kid? And I've had these conversations with my elders about it, and basically where I came out to this place, and a friend of mine, a male friend of mine, guided me here. He's on some, you can't teach umtu with violence, right? You can't. It's an ineffective tool. If you're teaching a person that violence, that you must violence is a thing to
respect.
Yeah,
Violence.
Lungu, don't fail me now. But that don't fail me now, English. Don't fail me.
We're almost there.
But if you're gonna tell, if a kid does something wrong, right, and you hit them to correct them, you need to understand what you're metaphorically teaching them as well. What foundation? So you're telling someone, when someone doesn't act in a way that pleases you, or someone does something that you consider to be wrong, you can put your hands on them. And so if we're going to talk about like how violent the world is, we need to also consider how we use violence in the raising
in our
of
homes,
and how that can it can like, some of us, we come out, we're fun, we're like me, we're laughing about having to pick the instrument of culture. But and some other people, and that was the foundation of learning how to be violent. Now, when they can't express themselves, bayashaya. When someone does something and they feel disrespected, threatened, instead of talking, bayashaya. So, and I remember once, like smacking my child, and I was so ashamed of myself. I was so ashamed of myself because that wasn't discipline. I was acting out. You know, I was upset and I was taking out like how I was feeling, and that's how I translated. I was on some, and that's what at home. Even when we're upset with each other, it's like, you know, I'm really disappointed in what you did. Mommy needs a time out so I can calm down, and then we'll talk about it. And so a few times when I have lost my temper and I've shouted at him, I remember apologizing to him and saying to him, what I did to you was wrong. I have no right to put my hands on you. Nobody on this planet has the right to put their hands on you. I hope that you will forgive me. I am sorry. And I'm having this conversation with like 8, 9 years old. And I mean, he was really tearful and he was touched. He was like, no, I understand that I was wrong. And I'm like, I don't need to treat you like that in order for you to understand that you were wrong. I will never, ever do that to you again. I am so sorry. Will you forgive me? I mean, graciously forgave me. But I mean, these are things that, you know, and that's what I mean about like intentional and being considerate. It's like,
yeah,
I can't tell you how I am consistently like just moved to my core at the awesome responsibility that it is rearing and nurturing this person. I am moved all the time. I'm constantly moved by it.
Yeah, ladies.
Nandi, just one more thing. Can I just add one more little thing, Ashanti? No?
Go.
One more little thing.
Go.
One more little thing. What you're saying is we're programming people. And when I was pregnant, we got a little puppy. And bad mistake, puppy, toddler, pregnant. And the puppy was driving me insane. And at some point, I went to the puppy's name was Lila. At some point, I went, Lila! Because I lost my mind. And then the next day, I heard my daughter go, Lila! And that's when I realized that, oh, shucks. How I communicate with her is exactly how she's going to be communicating with people. So it's exactly what you're saying, that if I say, if you're wrong, I hit you, it makes it acceptable. If somebody else does something wrong to them, then she can act out however. And it's not a reflection of what the person...
Why did you hit that person? No, they were wrong.
Like how, but
so I hit her. She was wrong. How you raised me, you know?
And I just got an aha moment by what she was saying, that when I shout or when I hit, it's not a reflection of what they've done. It's just me being unable to communicate my feelings accordingly, and not being able to basically what's the word? Digest what I'm feeling properly. Instead, I just want to spit it out and express it on somebody. So yeah, I think the whole timeout thing of, I just need 5 minutes. Let me calm down. Let me gather myself. We'll save a whole lot. We'll save our society, firstly our families and our society. That before you express your anger, take time out. After 5 minutes, you realize, actually, this is not how I want to express myself. Thanks, Ashanti.
Okay. That's fine. No, I'm going to ask you all for your closing remarks now, because we're literally in the last 3 minutes of the conversation. But I think, you know, we've touched on a number of different aspects and dynamics of this topic. And, you know, I think my mother always likes to say is that you need to rise above your raising if you didn't like it. Or you can take someone to the water, but you can't force them to drink, you know? So I think part of the unlearning the violence within our homes, even the GBV that happens, because part of gender-based violence is that the people closest to you are the ones that are doing this. So your uncles, your fathers, your brothers, all of these things. So how do we unlearn this violence in our homes? So I just want to, all of you, please, quick sticks, 60 seconds, closing remarks, speaking to how we can heal, how we can rise above our raisings and just like, you know, become better humans who are more wholesome, who are less divorced from what it means to be human. So Nogulinda, I'm going to ask you.
Sorry. The point that you raised about making a conscious decision about her following of faith, I think that is a very important thing that everybody needs to take into account. It is very important to make a conscious and deliberate choice about your following of faith and spirituality, because it underpins so much of the values that you impart on your children. You know, Mpumi made a very important point. She said, I made a choice at a particular age, but still I was behaving in X, Y, and Z way. As I got older, I was able to better understand my choices and base that in my faith to allow me the grace of growth and understanding my mistakes. And I therefore pass that on to my children through the message of Christ, through the messages of the Bible. And these are the tools that we are using as a family to take ourselves forward. And I think that that's so important. That's, that spiritual underpinning, that conscious decision making, that effort and that consistency. And this is how we behave in this family. This is how we find our healing. This is how we underpin our faith. These are the role models that we see and we believe. This is how we connect with something greater than ourselves. This is where we are rooted. And all of those kind of things also bring that kind of depth and grounding into how we raise our children and how we bring healing into these conversations and acting from a place of Christ-like love. For example, I think is something that everybody can learn, whether you're a Christian or not. I think it's important because it talks about conscious sacrifice. It talks about investment. It talks about grace. It talks about forgiveness. So even people who don't ascribe to that ethos, that organized religion, but they can learn from the ethos. And that ethos is underpinning of every religion and every mode of faith and every mode of spirituality. You take away, like what Mpumi was saying, the judgment, the this, the that. When we look at the foundational basis of all of those things, I think that it is very important. And like most South Africans, most Africans, a lot of us are striding the world of acknowledging our ancestors and having a religious basis for how we express our faith. And there doesn't need to be a tension between the two. There doesn't need to be a choice. But what Mpumi was saying was that whatever decision you make, give yourself the grace to grow. Give yourself the grace to believe. Give yourself also that humility of understanding that there's something bigger than you that gave you what you have. There's something more advanced and greater than where you are, so that you don't center yourself in your decisions. You know that you're basing your decisions from a lineage of wisdom. And that can come from whatever place you choose. And I think it's good to have a basis, and I think that is very important also to impart onto children so that they learn that they're not the center of the universe, so that they know that whatever they are doing is coming from a place, like Mpumi was saying, I know that this is what Christ gave for me. So you know that you're not the center of the universe. You know that you are the byproduct of some other decision and investment that was made, and you can look back on your bloodline and your lineage and your parents and say the same thing. And say, these were their sacrifices, these were their investments, and this is where I choose to step forward from. Okay, and I think that it's comforting as well to have that grounding. Sorry, thank you.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much. Lynn, do you want to give us closing remarks, and then Nandi, and then Mpumi?
Yes, I wanted to say that we've spoken about this intergenerational conversation. So we know that there's a message that we need to be giving to older people and to younger people. And we need to empower all people, whatever your gender, is that you can change the message and you don't have to do it alone. That there are people out there, whether it's at your church, whether it's in your family, there are people out there who are going to help you. So you don't have to battle on your own and live in the quagmire of mental health problems, mental illness, when you feel like you can't face whatever it is. And we are saying that Lifeline is here to facilitate the support that you need and the change you'd like to see in your families. Whether you've beaten up your child or you've shouted at your child and you don't feel good about it, there's people out there who are going to help you to overcome it, but you don't have to keep it inside of you and have this cancer that's going to eat into you. I want to thank these wonderful women who've been part of this journey today. And Ashanti, thank you once again for your marvelous, marvelous direction. I just pray that there's women out there who will have benefited greatly from what we've been talking about today.
Thank you so much, Nandi.
So I think for me, it's to reiterate and emphasize again around like living a considered life. We like to say things like God has a plan. We like to, when we talk about ourselves in the professional sense, we acknowledge that, like make a plan and work your plan. And the same thing needs to be said about how we raise our children. And like you need to consider, what is the culture of your household? We've all worked in corporations or organizations, and people go on and on and on about organizational culture, company culture. What is the culture of your household? I grew up in a household with an incredible culture. And what I want to offer my child, and I hope that he in turn offers his own children, is the culture of communication, a culture of kindness, and understanding that there is strength in love. And then I work that as a plan. You know, my child is at a stage now, like when he thinks of what he loves TED Talks, like there's TED Talks for kids. and I'm on some, when someone says to me, my kid is smart, I'm like, I know, yeah, that's me. This thing didn't happen by chance. Like I invest in him in the way that my parents invested in me. You know, I have a plan for him in the same way that God has a plan for me, you know, and my parents had a plan for me. So I think that if there's anything you can take from me today, it is to, you know, live a life of consideration.
Sure. Thank you so much. Those are such powerful words.
In closing, my closing will be very short, but I think it's just a sum of everything I said is love. Love, love, love. I think love is the beginning and love is the end. And also being fully present in whatever you do, being fully present, because it will allow you to feel what you need to feel, to be considerate and when you need to be considerate, and to consider the person you with. And when you're fully present, it's just, I feel like it's a spiritual practice. It's a meditation of knowing fully what's happening around you, and your decisions are informed. You're not just retaliating or trying to move on to the next thing, but in everything that you do it with love and be fully present.
Sure.
That's it
Thank
for
you
me.
so much. Thank you all ladies so much. And thank you all of you on YouTube and Zoom for joining us for this fantastic conversation. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.